Thank you, Sister Cynthia. As she was sharing that with us, I was reflecting on a conversation I had, actually a disagreement I had with my mom 2 weekends ago. And we were disagreeing over some other family members and my response to how they had treated me back in the day and how I treat them today and how she wanted me to treat them. So as she was talking about if a child lives with, this is what they'll learn. So my mother is upset with some family members who rejected me when I was younger. And she, as we were having this conversation, she told me, she said, well, you know now, you have children, you know how it is. People can do stuff to you, but when they do something to your child, it's altogether different. And when they said those things, when they wanted to treat you like you weren't good enough, that hurt me, that upset me, and you can't just expect me to just be all right with that now. And I told her, I said, Mom, you know, your being offended on my behalf doesn't honor me. I said, you know, I don't hold these things against these people because that's not what you taught me. I'm only doing what you taught me. I'm forgiving because that's who you raised me to be. I extend grace because that's what you taught me, because that's what your father taught you. So we went back and forth for a while, and it was this heated conversation, and my mother and I rarely argue. That's my best friend, and so it was, you know, in 1 minute she was crying, 1 minute I was crying, 1 minute she's walking off, 1 minute I'm walking off. And in the end, we came back together, and she was like, well, I'm just sorry. And then at that point, I'm crying, I'm sorry too. And, you know, she was standing there with her hands on her hips like she wanted to hug me. I was like, come on, hug me. You know we're going to hug. And so we hug each other, and we went out to dinner this past weekend, and we talked about that. And she said, you know, I just hate having disagreements with my kids. You know, when you all were little, it was all right, you know, because I knew I was the parent and I was right. But now you challenge me. You challenge me, and sometimes the roles are reversed, and you make me really think about myself. And I told her I can only do that because I learned from one of the best. So how you teach your children, how you treat your children will teach your children, and they'll become a reflection of that. So thank you, Cynthia. You took me back to that as a reminder. So last week we ended up talking about self-esteem, right? Y'all remember, for those ladies who were here? And I shared with you all that really for a long time I thought the answer to improving a person's self-view was to improve their self-esteem. But then the Holy Spirit shared with me in preparing last week that self-esteem wasn't really as important as self-acceptance. So that's where we ended last week in talking about self-acceptance. And while they seem like they might be similar things, self-acceptance suggests a global acceptance of yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it, no value judgment. It's total acceptance of all facets of ourselves, not just the positive, esteemable parts, the things that we like. It's unconditional and free of any kind of qualification. Sometimes when I talk to folks about self-acceptance or accepting others, they get it confused with allowing people to treat you any kind of way, or allowing yourself to be any kind of way. And so I wanted to make a clarification there. An awareness of our weakness and shortfalls doesn't interfere with our ability to fully accept ourselves. In self-acceptance, we non-judgmentally affirm who we are. It's possible to accept ourselves and remain committed to personal growth. So I think I may have mentioned this partner, actually it's a community partner some time ago, who came in, and she came in with her adult daughter because her adult daughter had a history of substance abuse, and she was concerned her adult daughter had relapsed and was using some of her medication. And the mother was very concerned. She has a very anxious disposition. She was very concerned that this child, her adult daughter who was now living with her, was going to slip back into using drugs and was going to be lost forever. So she came in with this idea that she was bringing her daughter to me for me to fix her. And I shared with her, well, really, I would like to see you individually, the two of you separately. One of the things that I asked her about was accepting her daughter. I said, you know, sometimes we have to be willing to meet people where they are and accept them where they are. And she said to me, oh, no. I can never accept her like this. I can't do it. And so I wanted to help her understand. I'm not saying accept her behavior. And last week we talked about you don't have to like something to value it. You don't have to like it to accept it either. In that example of my car, I ain't like that car, but I sure took it. I accepted it, and I drove it until I couldn't drive it no more, into the ground. I accepted it. So you don't have to like it to accept it. That was my point to her. Accepting yourself today doesn't mean you lack the motivation or desire to change and improve your future self. You can, and this is what I told her, you can accept your child where she is today and still encourage her to become who you feel like God has called her to be. It's not this or that. It's this and that. I can accept you and I can encourage you to continue growing. So when I say self-acceptance, it's not, okay, well, I am what I am and it's all I'm going to be, so here it is. Love me or leave me. My best friend back in the day, she had try to think of a good way to say this in case she watched the DVD. She had a disposition that was easy to offend. Now, she'll say that about herself, so I don't want her to get mad when she sees the DVD. She had a disposition that was easy to offend. And for the first few years of our friendship, I spent a lot of time walking on eggshells and trying to, placate, and is it going to be all right? And, well, I ain't going to say it this way because I don't want her to respond that way. Let me soften it and say it this way, or I just won't say it. It ain't even that important. Years into our relationship, as we both grew, we started talking about her personality, her disposition, as we talked about my own. And one of the things that she came to me later and said was that, the way I was, my family had always said, that's who she is. Well, you know how she is. That's just her, so, love her or leave her. And that's what she embraced. I ain't got to change. Either you're going to love me or you're going to leave me, and I'll be all right. But she wasn't all right. She was miserable. Saying that I accept who I am doesn't mean that I'm not interested in improving who I am. And so she was able to acknowledge that I can accept where I am today and still work towards becoming a better me. As a matter of fact, accepting who you are today gives you permission to consider who you want to be in the future and start working towards that person instead of focusing on your past transgressions and your perceived flaws that tend to keep us bogged down in our past. So if I keep denying who I am today, if I keep saying to myself, okay, I'll give you the example for my friend. She denied that she was this person who was easily offended. For me, I denied that I was a person who was a people pleaser. No, that's not me. The more she denied that she was this person that was easy to offend, the more she would reflect on these relationships that she lost, and the less she could accept the role she played in those lost relationships. So then she couldn't grow and become who God had called her to be. The more I denied that I was a people pleaser, the more I denied myself some of my own freedoms, the less I was free to be who God had called me to be in the relationships I had today. Does that make sense, ladies? So accepting yourself today doesn't mean that you're not working towards changing. It actually frees you up so that you're not constantly thinking about the past and those mistakes, so that you can start changing and affecting your future. Self-acceptance can occur as a result of self-compassion and choosing to focus much more on our positives than our negatives, which is not always what was done to us as children or even as adults. We're usually made aware of our mistakes and what we get wrong far more frequently than we're praised for our accomplishments and what we get right. We learn this way of appraising ourselves early on in life, in childhood. Most of us embrace it and carry it with us throughout our life, making self-acceptance conditional upon our behavior. We're only acceptable if we behave a certain way. So part of our work during this series will be to learn how to accept ourselves, not just based on what we like, but all of ourselves. Have you ever had the thought or ever heard somebody say, I'm sure all of us has had this thought about somebody in our lives, you know what? I love her, but I don't like her. Can you relate to that? I love him, but I do not like him. That's how I had to view my ability to accept certain things about myself. Love requires acceptance. It doesn't mean that I have to like it. I love me. I don't like this extra weight I'm carrying. But I love me. I accept me. I don't have to like me, everything about me, to love me. So I can accept all of me without necessarily liking everything about me, and I can work on the things I don't like about myself without loving and accepting me any less. The question you have to ask yourself is, can you? Can you do that? Most of us don't do that. Most of us focus on the things we don't like about ourselves, and we treat ourselves like we don't love ourselves. So as I prepared for you last week, because this is the end of last week's talk, God shared a word with me as to why I'm able to accept myself and love myself despite my current flaws and weaknesses, and he instructed me to share it with you. God says you too should be able to do this because he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. That's his word. That's his promise to us. He didn't say he who began a all right work in you. It wasn't he who began a so-so work in you. He began a good work. A good work. And when you can look your reflection in the mirror and see that there is something good that he began in you, that he is going to bring to completion, then you can start reflecting on how you can accept yourself. So for tonight's session, I had a trying week last week, and he used some of those events to inspire me for tonight. So he had me think about this whole thing about self-acceptance and where does it start. And from the time we're born, we start searching for the same thing, every single one of us, which is acceptance. We are created to be in relationship. That's why God put us here. We need others to survive. There is not a baby that's born that the mama can leave it, drop it out the womb, walk away. Nobody come by, do anything for that baby, and that baby will survive. It will not. It will die. Back in the day, before we had the human subjects review committees for research, they could do studies on children and people that today we'd consider unethical. But back in the day, they did some research where they looked at children who were in an orphanage, and they took the children and they put them in two different groups. And so they took one group of children and they separated them and they said, you all will be engaged with human contact, and the orphanage keepers, the nurses, the caregivers, they will come and interact with you like you're their children. This other group of babies, you will be given the bare minimum. You won't receive a whole lot of human contact, not a whole lot of touch. You'll be fed, but you won't really be talked to. You'll get the bare minimum to sustain your life. The babies who got all the normal contact that we get, of course they thrived. They did very well. What do you think happened to the babies who didn't get it? They died. They didn't thrive. But it wasn't like they just woke up one day and the caregivers went in and they dropped dead. No. They died a slow, painful, miserable, lonely death. Because life is about relationships. So if your relationships are not in order and you're thinking, oh, I don't need people, think again. We absolutely need one another. So we learned very early on that there are rewards for doing things that are pleasing to others. Let's take a baby's smile, for example. When you smile at a baby, what does the baby do? Smile back. When a baby smiles at you, what do? You smile back. That's what we do. The baby learns at an early age that when she does something pleasing, she gets a specific response, a nice response. When she coos at you, you bring her closer to your chest. where she can be warm and feel loved. When she makes a silly noise, you laugh and engage her even more. Physiologically, what's happening to your body, because I want you ladies to understand some things. These things are not just all in our mind. We are created as holistic beings, so when you feel that change in your face, in the smile, it starts a change in your brain, a chemical process. You start releasing these neurotransmitters, these feel-good hormones is what we call them, which then starts a change in your thinking. It's very hard to smile, a genuine, authentic smile, and have a nasty, ugly thought. Now, you can smile one of them nasty smiles like, hi, God bless you. That's not what I'm talking about. When you smile a genuine, like, I asked my daughter the other day, Bella, to show me some faces. I really wanted to get her to smile nicely for the camera. And you know, when they're really little, they have a hard time coming up with an authentic fake smile. You know, they give you the, and it's like, baby, that you look like you in pain. My son used to do it, my oldest son, and we used to tell him, you look like you constipated. Just don't smile, just don't smile. So I was trying to get Bella to give me a smile, and so I took her through all the ranges of the faces. I said, okay, well, look, show me sad. So she said, I said, okay, show me surprised. She said, I said, okay, show me happy. Now, I wanted an authentic smile, and this is what she gave me. I said, okay, well, show me like really, really happy, like this is the best day ever. And she said, I said, okay, we'll take that picture. You at least don't look constipated like your older brother, so we will take that. But when you're doing that authentic smile, your brain is releasing these chemicals. So then you start having good thoughts. There is a biological, physiological, and I believe a spiritual reaction when we engage in those behaviors. So as you're looking at that little baby smiling at you and you're smiling at that baby, you start relating to this baby. And that baby relates to you, and no words have come from your mouth. You have as of yet to say anything. It's just in a look. Tell me we are not fearfully and wonderfully created. When we learn that pleasing others can bring pleasure to ourselves, that teaches us very quickly that this can be a win-win situation, that we can gain something out of pleasing others. So there's nothing wrong with, God put that mechanism in place. There is something innate in us, in a mother and a child, that when the mother hears the baby cry, it's a distress call. It's you immediately. And sometimes it doesn't even matter if it's your child or not. Once you've had a child, you hear anybody's child cry, and it's like, eh. And when they've done studies, they've listened to the frequency at which that cry registers. And there's something specific about the frequency that touches women in a specific way. How many of you nursed your babies? Yeah, baby, you know. So you will understand it when I say you come in the house, that baby gets to crying, your breasts get to hurting. Your milk lets down. You haven't even done any, you haven't seen the baby, you haven't gone, but the baby cries, and it's like a signal. Your brain picks it up, and it's like, oh, that baby hungry, you better go and get ready to go in there. Okay. I used to try to describe the feeling to my husband, because he was like, what is wrong? You just act like, it feels like a toothache in my breast. That's what's wrong. She cries, I want to relieve it. God created it that way. I am not comfortable until I get her comfortable, because she can't take care of herself. I'm responsible. God made us that way for a reason. So pleasing others is not the issue. But like my mama used to say, too much of anything. Some of us develop a need to please others. We go from enjoying that pleasurable feeling of engaging in pleasing activities with others to having a need to please. I call it the disease to please. I'm in recovery. Anyone else? Recovering, disease to please? That's where I am. I feel like I need to stand up. Hello all, my name is Stacy Scott, and I'm in recovery for the disease to please. Y'all supposed to say, welcome, Stacy Scott. At one point in my life, I was the poster child for this particular disease. So I started thinking, where does this come from? Again, all of us are born with a certain amount of it. It's required because it's beneficial in helping us get our needs met early on in life. But some of us develop an unhealthy desire for it. Many times it's based on our early learned behaviors. We learn that some of our relationships are very conditional, and if we don't do what others want us to do, they might just reject us, deny us, abandon us. And it's my belief that because we are created to be in relationships, this is an innate fear for most of us. Being alone. I used to fear being alone so much that after I had children, and even sometimes to this day, Jason will refer to this, I would have a lot of anxiety of how people viewed me. So sometimes when I would have to go places, Jason and I would be going, baby be with us. Get out the car all day long. I've been like, boys, you better hold that baby. You better take that baby. I'm tired. I carried him for 9 long months. You can hold on to him now. We get somewhere like to his parents' house, or we have to go into a setting that I'm not familiar with. Give me my baby. And Jason used to say, oh, you want your armor. You need to put your armor bearer in front of you. You got to have your shield. I said, okay, all right, I can accept that. That is what it is. I used to have the thought of being alone, and it would create anxiety for me because I would take that thought to a whole nother level. And I didn't really understand where that came from. You know, nobody should want to not be alone. All of us should be okay at some point being by ourselves. As an early adult, God revealed to me that you don't want to be alone because you don't want to think about what you think about yourself. And when it's alone, it's quiet. And all you're left with are your thoughts. You want a distraction all the time. So some of us go to extremes to avoid experiencing this rejection. For some of us, it can happen so early in life at a time when we aren't equipped to take care of ourselves, and we respond by pleasing others so we can ensure that we will have our basic needs met always. And we develop that early, but we carry that on throughout the rest of our lives, not realizing, okay, back then you were like 2, and you needed to always make sure you were doing stuff that was pleasing so you could get what you needed, but now you're 42. Why are you still in this relationship with this person who clearly does not have your best interest in mind? Why are you continuing to be that doormat? Why would you do that to yourself? While people may not always physically leave us as a response to their rejection, they can emotionally withdraw from us and withhold love and affection, which sends us a message that we're unlovable. And that starts leading us down that path of questionable self-worth. So when we start talking about that conditional self-esteem, some of us are born very conscientious of others. That's a part of our disposition. That's how God made us. But then we're exposed to someone who may be manipulative or see that vulnerability in us. And they see it as a weakness, so they want to expose it or exploit it. And this could be the beginning of us developing the disease to please. That's how I developed this potentially life-threatening condition. And I want you all to see it as that, because that's the truth of it. When you are a people pleaser and you're constantly living your life so that someone else will accept you, will love you, you're constantly judging yourself based on how they view you, you're not living your life at all. You're living their life. You're existing in a way that makes them content. And to me, that becomes a life-threatening condition. So my mom reminds me to this day of how conscientious I was as a kid. I was very concerned with doing the right thing and making her proud. And when I went to graduate school, one of my professors, who was an advisor at the time, she sat down and she started telling me the qualities about me. And that was one of the things she listed first. You are very conscientious. And it took me back to a memory when my mom was trying to teach me how to clean the bathroom. She took me in the bathroom and she said, okay, baby, this is what I want you to do. You clean the sink, clean the sink, clean around the sink, clean in the sink, clean the tub, clean the toilet. I want you to get up under the toilet, lift the toilet seat. I want you to sweep the floor, and then clean the floor. Make sure you clean all the mirrors, and you clean all the faucets. And I said, okay. She said, you got it? I got it. I can do this, Mommy. Got the chemicals, I can do it. And you know, when you're a kid, the spray bottles and all that's fun till you really got to be cleaning up. Then it's like, I don't want to do this. What was I thinking? What was I smoking? I don't want to do this. But I had all the chemicals, and I was feeling like, okay, she gave me the yellow gloves. You know, I put on the gloves. I'm gloved up and going in. I go in. I'm taking my time. I've watched her do it 1,000,000 times. I'm going to do this. It's going to be nice. She's going to come in, and she's going to be like, good job, baby. So I get it all cleaned up. I look around. I feel good. I go get her. Mom, come look, I'm done. She said, you sure? I am, I'm done. Walk back in the bathroom, and she look around, and she does the sink. Good. She looks in the mirror. Good job. Okay, she looks at the toilet. She lifts the seat. All right. She looks over at the tub. Good. At the floor. Okay, good job. And she turns to me, she says, baby, you did a really good job. You did a good job cleaning the bathroom. There's only one thing I want to point out to you that you missed. And I'm telling you all, this is exactly how she said it to me. So there's only one thing. You see right here on the side of the tub, y'all know you have one of those tubs that has the sliding door on it. And the tub has a lip, you know, so you have the sliding door, then you have the edge of the tub that extends out just a little bit further. So when you're stepping over that edge, well, you know, dirt from your feet and all sorts of stuff can fall on that edge. Well, I had missed the edge. And so it was dirt on the edge. And she was like, baby, this is the only thing you missed, so all you got to do is take your sponge and come on back over here and clean that up, and great job. And she walked on out. It was good. For me, that's all I could focus on. All of the good job when she looked in the mirror, the great job on the floor, the good job with the toilet, I couldn't hear any of that anymore. All I heard was, you missed the lip on the tub. How could you miss that? Dang. So I went back and I got it, cleaned it up, went on to my room. She came up there later. What you doing? So I talked to her about it, and she explained to me, baby, there are going to be many times in your life where you're not going to get everything exactly right. Okay, so you got 9 out of 10 things right. If this was a test, you'd have got a 90. Come on downstairs, let's go get us some ice cream. You shake that off. That's how my mom treated me. Very fair, very diplomatic. She wasn't overly critical or harsh. She was just the opposite. But as I share this next section, I want you all to think about your early relationships, okay? Because having a mother like my mom, having parents like my parents, my dad was a lot like my mom, it doesn't make you immune to being damaged by other folks. So I want you to think about the early relationships you had, who you were exposed to, who you developed an intimate connection with, and the impact they had on your sense of self. Did they serve to build you up or to tear you down? What messages did you receive about you? This is my word of caution to all parents. Be careful of who you expose your children to and who you allow to influence them. And this is my next word of caution. I want you to hear this. Blood alone does not define the quality of the relationship, and therefore we need to be careful not to expose our children to people and put them in harm's way simply because that person is kin. Y'all get that? How many of you know that kinfolk ain't always the best folk to be around? Okay. So while my home life was good and stable, my immediate family was loving and trustworthy, I had some very unsavory characters in my extended family. And I'm just going to tell the truth and shame the devil. Because this is what we don't do. We hide all this. We want our families to look perfect. There are many reasons why we become who we become, so I'm not going to speculate on why my family members became who they became. And these aren't excuses. There are reasons why we do what we do and we become who we become. But when you know better, you do better. And for that reason, God showed me better, and I had to learn to let some people go. I had to learn to let some relationships go. And I refused to expose my children to the toxins I was exposed to. So y'all have heard me make mention of my grandmother before. I love her still. But she is and has always been a toxic person to me and my family. And that's the truth. So when I was a kid, I used to go to her house for the weekends. This is the opposite. This is the difference between what I learned at home and what I learned at my grandmother's. And this is how you start getting into issues of this person who's conscientious becoming someone who's a people pleaser. I was 5 years old. My parents sent me to my grandmother's house, and they came to pick us up. They sent us on Friday. They picked us up on Sunday after church. My parents came to pick us up one Sunday after church. And I went and gave my grandmother a hug. My grandmother, by the way, was a Pentecostal minister, woman of the cloth. According to her, she sat on the right hand of God, right by his throne. So I went to pick her up. My parents came to pick me up, and it was time to go. I went to say goodbye to my grandmother. I walked over to her, and I hugged her. And I said, all right, I got to go. My grandmother is one of those grandparents that back in the day, you couldn't call her grandmother. You had to call her mother. So I had a mother. I had a mama. I had one, but I still had to call my grandmother mother. So I went to her, and I said, okay, mother, it's time to leave. I have to go. My mommy and daddy are here. And she said, okay, all right, you go ahead. And I said, okay. And I gave her a kiss, and I walked away, walked out the front door, and she came out on the porch. And my grandmother didn't have to say anything for you to know that she was displeased with you. She didn't have to, say a word. She could make a noise, and it was, And I heard that. So I turned around. I'm 5. I turned around, and I said, Mother, is something wrong? My grandmother is the only grandparent I ever had. I don't know my biological father. My stepdad, his family was good, but they weren't my family. He was my daddy, but his family weren't my grandparents. So my grandmother was it for me. My grandfather died the year before I was born, so everything rested on my grandmother. She said, I said, are you okay? No, yeah, I'm fine. Going home with your mama and your daddy. I said, okay. So I ran back to give her one more hug just to reassure her. I'll be back next weekend. You don't love me. Yes, I do. I do love you. No, you don't. You going on home with them people. You don't love me. 5. I said, okay. I walked to the car. My 5-year-old little eyes welled up. Tears started running down my face. I got in the car in the back seat, and my mama said, what's wrong? And I said, Mother said, I don't love her because I have to go home. Can I just stay another day? And she said, no, baby, tomorrow is school. You have to come home. And I got in that car, and my grandmother said, you don't love me because you leaving me. You don't care about me. And when I got in the car and looked back at her, I couldn't hear her, but I saw her body. And she saw me looking at her, and she turned around and turned her back on me. And she walked in her house. And I cried the whole way home. And I learned at that time that if I didn't do what she wanted me to do, when she wanted me to do it, the way she wanted me to do it, I didn't love her. And what kind of kid didn't love their grandmother, their only grandparent? It certainly wasn't a good kid who deserved good things. It was a bad kid who deserved bad things. This was how the mind of a 5-year-old operates. This is where these seeds get planted. This is where that self-worth, that conditional self-esteem starts showing up. And this is where my disease to please first showed up in my life. I wish I could say I was cured of it shortly after I contracted it, but it wasn't the case. I did not get over it that quickly. So there's a book called The Search for Significance by Robert S. McGee that I've been thumbing through, and I came across an interesting chart. I'm going to share this with you, and then we're going to wrap and pick up next week. The author uses this book to help us look at some of the false beliefs we hold and the consequences of those beliefs and God's answer to some of those lies, which is why I like it. He has a couple of chapters he dedicates to the approval addict. So if you don't like to call yourself a person who is in recovery from the disease to please, you can refer to yourself as an approval addict. He says that the false belief that this person operates from, the approval addict, is I must be approved by certain others to feel good about myself. That's what I learned at 5. He advises that the consequences of thinking like this is that you develop the fear of rejection. Many of us struggle with that. You attempt to please others at any cost. You become overly sensitive to criticism, and you're willing to withdraw from others to avoid disapproval. Now, what God gave me when I thought about the fear of rejection, it really struck me that the very thing you're trying to avoid, which is rejection and being alone, is exactly what you draw to yourself in the end, being alone, because you start withdrawing from other people because you're afraid to be rejected. That doesn't even make good sense. But we do it all the time. McGee says God's answer to this false belief is reconciliation. Reconciliation means that although I was at one time hostile toward God and alienated from him, I am now forgiven and have been brought into an intimate relationship with him. Consequently, I am totally accepted by God. So we're going to pick up here next week. I want to fast forward you guys through my life and tell you what that disease to please ended up looking like as an adult. And even as I recover today, one of my recovery moments last week. For homework, I want you all to consider the relationships that influenced and shaped you from your childhood and your early adolescent years. I want you to make a list of the top 5. If you can only come up with 2 or 3, that's fine. But I want you to make a list of those you believe were most influential during this time frame. And I want you to write down the overall message you received from this person about you. Then reflect on that message in light of God's word. The scriptures that I read here tonight, Philippians 1:6, Colossians 1:21 through 22, and determine if that message is true according to who God says you are. Because it could be good. It could be something good. If it's not, I want you to really reflect on the scripture and let God show you that. And then I want you to thank him for accepting you and ask him to help you as you continue to learn to accept yourself. I look forward to us all continuing to grow into the she who he has called us to be. The information will be online, ladies, for the homework. That's it. Y'all can go to Bible study. Thank you.